Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So, a pretty significant event has happened over the past, say, 24 hours or so. If you have studied what the American empire has become and how our country has controlled other countries and gained influence around the world, this event that just happened is very, very significant. It has been the closure and now the investigation into USAID. Now, we're going to be diving into what is USAID, why is it so significant? Is it the big deep state everyone's been trying to take down, or is it just the tip of the iceberg? And so much more. But I can tell you that from my research, USAID has played a significant role in allowing the corrupt deep state within our own government to gain control over countries around the world. We're talking regime changes, debt slavery, and so much more. So we'll be going into all that detail and a lot more, but then also looking at the bigger picture of the geopolitical shift that's happening right now and why, in my own perspective, I believe that what we're seeing is a retraction of the American global empire into an empire focused just on America. Now, America may soon include Canada and Greenland, and that's a different different story and different topic. But it seems as if there's this big shift back to the internalized, back to the core of what America is. So before we jump into the show and the details of all this we're going over, thank you for joining us live tonight. It's great to be here with you. If you're watching on YouTube, you should be watching on Rumble because on YouTube, you're only seeing maybe 10% of the content I put out there because most of what I talk about YouTube will censor and I'll get strikes. So it only goes on to Rumble. So if you want to watch the video format, head over to Rumble, watch it there, or you can go to any podcast app and download the podcast. I'm also on Brighteon and BitChute, a lot of the other channels as well. Also, as we're kind of diving in, a lot of what we're talking about is the global economic financial situation. And I have a few notes and a few messages for you on that. But one of the big ones is that with the stock market on a record high right now, are you confident that your portfolio can weather the next big downturn? Market corrections are quick and unforgiving, wiping out hard earned gains in an instant. Smart investors know the key to financial security is diversification. That is why Noble Gold Investments makes it easy for Americans to hedge them against market volatility and protect their wealth with gold. Since 2010, central banks have steadily increased their gold reserves, and in 2024, gold prices soared over 25%. Gold is simple. You buy it, you own it, you control it. With over $2 billion in precious metals sales, Noble Gold Investments has helped thousands of investors diversify their portfolio with gold IRAs and physical gold. And now, when you open a qualified Noble account, Noble Gold will gift you two 5-ounce silver America the Beautiful coins as a thank you. So don't wait for the next downturn to catch you off guard. Visit goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 and see how easy it is to incorporate gold into your investment strategy. So again, that's 626-654-1906 or goldwithseth.com. All right, so folks, as we kind of dive into this, I'll bring up first a post from my good friend Mickey Willis over on X. He really helps lay out the big picture of USAID. So he says here, the acronym USAID stands for United States Agency for International Development. It is funded by taxpayers and headquartered in Washington, D.C. However, the only people USAID truly aids are corrupt politicians and their masters. One of its primary functions is to further empower the Pentagon, the State Department, and the CIA. For years, foreign governments have accused USAID of serving as a front for the CIA and other groups working to destabilize their nations. It operates as a money laundering machine, siphoning billions of taxpayer dollars into globalist agendas. Here are just a few examples. $520 million paid to environmental, social, and governance (ESG) consultants, $375 million spent on diversity, equity, and inclusion grants, $1.14 billion allocated to a port and a power plant project promoted by President Bill Clinton, yet nothing was ever built. A 2006 audit revealed $74 million in democracy promotion funds that vanished without oversight, $2 million for sex change procedures and LGBTQ activism in Guatemala. Hey, I'm happy my tax money is going towards sex changes in Guatemala. $2.5 million to advance the DEI agenda in Serbia. $70,000 to produce an Irish DEI musical. $47,000 to create and promote transgender operas in Colombia. $32,000 to develop a transgender-themed comic book in Peru. $20 million for children's television programs promoting the LGBTQ agenda in Iraq. $27 million for deportee gift bags in Central America. USAID AID has funded programs that have directly benefited terrorists in several countries. $1.2 billion funneled to undisclosed recipients. $40 million given to a Wuhan scientist for gain-of-function research, which directly contributed to the creation and release of COVID-19. And this is just a short list. And actually, we just found out, I think it was today, that I think it's season 3 of the Rings of Power, right? The remake of the Lord of Rings on Amazon Prime has been, I think, either canceled or delayed, but because they lost their funding, because there was a bunch of funding coming from USAID to literally promote the transgender and DEI agenda in Middle Earth, right? So like it sounds like a Babylon Bee headline, and maybe it was, I don't know, but that's what I was seeing. Absolutely wild. But what you see here, though, is that our money, our taxpayer money, which has been stolen from us through the IRS, which I hope that the IRS is the next target for the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. But our taxpayer dollars are not going towards our roads and our infrastructure and maybe a small portion of it, but it's actually being siphoned off into criminal activities. Now, the key is that with these programs that I just listed, from Mickey Willis, a lot of this stuff wasn't actually put towards these events. Now, I think the $70,000 for the Irish DEI musical, I believe I saw the videos of that. It was pretty sad. However, a lot of this is just front money, and the money then gets laundered. It gets used in other activities, or it gets used by the CIA for regime change activities, for debt enslavement. And really, a lot of what we're seeing is that USAID is a central figure in what the author John Perkins calls the economic hitman strategy. So John Perkins, who I've actually interviewed before, brilliant guy, wrote the book, which now there's like 3 or 4 versions later have come out, called Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where he described exactly how funds like these and how NGOs and the big corporations were being used to overthrow regimes, to seize resources of other countries, and so much more. So I have a short video to play for you. It's about 2 minutes, which is a walkthrough that shows exactly what's happening with the economic hitman model. So again, this is a 2-minute video that this really, better than almost anything I could show you today, explains how a lot of the funds that our government is playing around with, that are honestly coming in large sums from our own tax money, how these funds are used for illicit activities around the world, including assassination of presidents. So watch this quick video here. I'll full screen it for you. It's about 2 minutes, because this really helps to set the stage for our discussion tonight.
We economic hitmen have managed to create the world's first truly global empire, and it's basically a secret empire. We do it many ways, but principally we identify a country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sisters. The money never actually goes to the country. It goes to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country that help a few very wealthy people, but don't benefit the majority of the people who are too poor to buy electricity or have cars to drive on the highways, and yet they're left holding a huge debt that they can't repay. So we go back at some point and say, you can't pay your debts. Give us a pound of flesh, sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies, vote with us on the next critical UN vote, allow us to build a military base in your backyard. something along these lines. And when we fail, the jackals go in and either overthrow or assassinate these leaders. And if the jackals fail, as they did in Iraq, then we send in the military. I don't think the failure is capitalism. I think it's a specific kind of capitalism that we've developed. We've created what I consider a mutant, viral form of capitalism. And this mutant form of capitalism, which I think is really a predatory form of capitalism, has created an extremely unstable, unsustainable, unjust, and very, very dangerous world. I've met a lot of terrorists. I've interviewed them for books. I've never met one who wanted to be a terrorist. They're desperate people. If we want to get rid of terrorism, we must get rid of the root causes, that cancer that is destroying our whole system. Because I think it's really important that we understand today we cannot have homeland security unless we understand that the whole planet is our homeland.
So I've always found it to be a very, very helpful video that kind of gives a brief overview. I highly recommend you read the book. And his most recent version gets into how the CCP has been copying this economic hitman model, only under their guise. It's the Belt and Road Initiative. Now I feel like he praises the CCP a little too strongly, and maybe is a little bit idealistic about the end goals, because what the CCP has done under the Belt and Road Initiative is they've gone in and while the US would come in, like going back, I'll pull this tweet back up from Mickey here, because one of these is the perfect example, right? Where he says, right here, 1.4 billion allocated to a port and a power plant project promoted by Bill Clinton, yet nothing was ever built. This is the exact kind of technique that they've used to go in and seize control of these countries. Is they'll promise this massive, massive infrastructure project. They'll give them a loan, right, through the World Bank or through USAID funds. And then what happens, though, is, let's just say there's a country like Ecuador, right? And actually, John Perkins talks a lot about Ecuador in the book. He was very close with, I think, the president of Ecuador at that time, that, if I recall correctly, was assassinated by the CIA jackals because the president of Ecuador was a good man and he refused to sell out his own country, knowing that it was just a debt enslavement and that their own raw resources, natural resources, land, military bases, etc., were going to be siphoned off to the U.S. corporations and to basically this global cabal that has been taking root in our own government and our own military-industrial complex. And so there's also, I think, the president of Panama as well. And so China, as he explains in his most recent book, his updated version of it, has been using the Belt and Road Initiative to do similar. Now, China was smart, though, and they didn't go in there and just screw everyone over and not have the plant work. They've actually put more money into the infrastructure, but ultimately, because what I believe is it's part of China's goal to become the dominant player in the entire world, and they needed to have the infrastructure in order to do that. And I think that because the United States has been at this game for much longer than the CCP, we've gotten sloppy. Not we, but the corrupt governments, corrupt officials and unelected bureaucrats, etc. They've gotten a little bit sloppy and they haven't fulfilled a lot of those promises. But now I really believe that what's happening is what we've seen, and I'll get into this in towards the end of the show, is that there is a massive shift from a unipolar world, which is really the American empire that was overseeing so much of what was happening in the world, which emerged post World War II, shifting into a multipolar world. And so I'll be getting into that towards the end of the show, though, because right now I'm going to be focusing more on some of the details of USAID. So coming into here's an article. This is from CBS News. From today, USAID missions overseas ordered to shut down, staff being recalled by Friday. So, as you heard John Perkins explain, they had people and agencies and NGOs all over the world working on behalf of from the funding of USAID. So shutting all these things down, it does represent a pretty massive shift in America, pulling back these efforts and pulling back this funding that had really created this massive deep state global operation. So I'll read a little bit from this article here. All right, so it says, all overseas missions for the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, have been ordered to shut down, and all staff will be recalled by Friday. multiple sources confirmed to CBS News. The newly appointed deputy administrator for the office, Pete Morocco, met with State Department leadership on Tuesday and instructed them to get every USAID employee out of their respective countries worldwide by Friday, according to the two sources familiar with the matter. He said that if the State Department did not, the staff would be evacuated by the U.S. military. Now, here, now you'll read between the lines. Obviously, this is CBS. This is one of the propaganda outlets. So it says the agency provides humanitarian aid to more than 100 countries, including disaster relief, health and medical aid, and emergency food programs. USAID has more than 10,000 employees, with about two-thirds serving overseas. The agency maintains more than 60 country and regional missions. It says the Trump administration has targeted USAID as the president and his allies, including billionaire Elon Musk, the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, seek to cut the size of the federal government. It says the future of the agency, which was established in 1961 to combat poverty, strengthen democracy, and protect human rights and global health, is now uncertain. So again, here's the language. Like, to me, whenever I read these things, and I read them talking about some sort of government initiative that is, was established to combat poverty, strengthen democracy, and protect human rights and global health, all I see there are buzzwords and words that have multiple meanings. So they say it's to combat poverty. No, it's to keep certain nations poor. Strengthen democracy? No, it's to overthrow countries and do regime changes and take control and rig elections. And protect human rights? Like, well, no, not really. And promote global health, which we just saw how great the global health response was to the pandemic with the global jab rollout and everything, which we'll be talking about Mr. Bill Gates soon. So now, what's happening, though, is that within DC, everyone's freaking out. Now, one thing I want to be very clear about is that while it seems as if a lot of the response and the anger is coming from the Democrats, the right is also heavily involved in USAID. There are a lot of Republicans and Republican organizations that are heavily involved in this. So it's, I really don't like getting into the left-right political situation, because I really believe that we have a uniparty, that the left and the right are working together, and they have been for a very, very long time, and that they put on a DC show to make us think that we have this choice of, oh, well, if we vote this guy in, he's going to fix everything. If we vote that guy in, he's going to fix everything. Now, I do believe to a large extent that Trump is not part of that two-party system, or really that uniparty, and he's outside, but we're not going to be getting into those details on this show. But what I can tell you, though, is that it is both parties. However, it has been the Democrats and the Democrat leadership that we've seen has been heavily involved in a lot of these USAID activities. Now, not to say that the wars that Bush started with Bush and Cheney, those were absolutely part of this global U.S. dominance. And as John Perkins mentioned, that if they're trying to overthrow a country and try to get them to buy into this debt slavery system, if the president, if the leader of that country does not agree, and this is one of John Perkins' jobs, because he was the economic hitman. He was the guy that would go in there and try to convince a president that, hey, this massive infrastructure project is going to pay off, but he knew he was lying through his teeth. Now, if the leader of that country also knew he was lying through his teeth and said, look, I'm not going to sell out my people. This is a debt trap. I'm not going to do it. Then what would happen is that next, as John Perkins describes in his book, the CIA jackals then come in and they will assassinate that president and then put their own leader in. Now, as you saw in the animation, if the assassination attempt fails, then they send in the army. And so if you look at what Bush was doing across the Middle East with the search for weapons of mass destruction, to me, it was the exact same game. Is he was going there, he was doing regime changes, seizing control of natural resources, especially oil. I think there's a lot more that was happening over there with them seeking ancient relics, and that's a whole different story. However, the point that I'm making is it's not just the left or the right. But I will show you a tweet I think is really worth looking at. This is from this account, Aesthetica, who says, talk to a friend who has connections within the Democratic Party, and he said the level of panic over Trump and Elon shutting down USAID is unlike anything he's ever seen. By following the money, Doge has struck a killing blow to the heart of the Democrat deep state machine. Direct quote, This is worse than 9/11 for Democrats. USAID is the primary vessel they use to achieve their political agenda. USAID is and always has been the primary source of funding for their influence peddling schemes and their indirect sources of income. Another text said, based on the reactions from within the party, it seems to me that dismantling USAID is Trump's biggest political victory to date. It was his enemy's golden goose. The same source who told me during the campaign, well before it was made public, that Kamala's internal polling had her behind Trump, so his information is good. Another important addition, he says, he said the initial plans by the Democrat is to have their people at the USAID hide the partisan funding under unimpeachable initiatives. They will push back really hard on certain line items that on their face look reasonable, like USAID expenditures, and hide their political spending under these programs. So it looks like that they can't hide things. Like they're dismantling this entire crime scene and figuring out what's really going on there. Now, here's an interesting thing to look at. These were the top USAID contracts in 2024. So let me zoom in here for you. These are the contracts here, if you can see this. Now, this company, Chemonics, so this one it has received a lot of money. So in 2024, the obligations that they received looks like around 6.3 billion. They also got below that the second one, or so the third one is another 2.5 billion and another 788 billion, but below that as well. I looked into Chemnotics International Company. It just looks like this again looks like some sort of governmental type NGO or some company that does government work for them, where they're helping rebuild things in Afghanistan. And to me, it looks like a cover story for tons of deep state activity. However, you can see that Pfizer got $4.1 billion from USAID in 2024. So in 2024 alone, USAID gave Pfizer, right, a public company, it's not a government company, they gave Pfizer $4.1 billion. This is our tax money that was going to a massive pharmaceutical company that also happens to control advertising, that has heavy, heavy influence over our politicians. If you look at the recent RFK Jr. confirmation hearing, you can see that this is not an unbiased discussion that was happening. You could see that there was massive big pharma money that was, in my opinion, pulling the strings of a lot of these politicians. Now, let's go check out a quick video of Mr. Gates. So Mr. Gates was recently on I think it was The View, one of my favorite shows, The View, to discuss how this affects what he's doing. Now, one thing I'll point out here is if you've watched a lot of videos of Bill Gates, which I have, I've tried to analyze the guy and break down his motives and understand his body language. He oftentimes has the body language of being very relaxed, almost comical, almost as if he's a guy that has all the control and he's kind of sitting back in his chair. He's laughing at things. Oh, we'll see. We'll see. This is what we're doing. But he really exudes an air of confidence. It's the confidence of somebody who's in control. Now, when I look at Bill Gates in this particular interview right here, I'll play about a minute and 18-second clip for you. The body language that I see is someone who has lost control. Even his language that he's using, he's stammering. He's not speaking clearly. So watch this and let me know in the comments what you think and if you're reading the same thing with his body language. So listen to this.
You also called Elon Musk's political influence abroad, quote, insane, along with another word we can't repeat here. But what's your take on his political access and influence here in America right now?
Well, Elon, his private sector work, has been very innovative, really fantastic. A lot of private sector people, when they get into government, they don't take the time necessarily to see what the good work is or why it's structured the way it is. So I'm a little worried, particularly with this USAID stuff. My foundation partners with USAID on nutrition and
So I'll just kind of point out something. Look at his shoulders. His shoulders are in a protective posture, right? So why do you do this, right? Why do people that are depressed or scared? Because you're protecting your body, you're protecting your head. Or if you look at body language, it's a very simple thing. So when you look at him, how he's curled up like this, it's apparent that he has lost a lot of that confidence, right? You look at this versus you look at someone that is not in that state. They're strong, their chest is forward, their shoulders are back, and it's you're saying, look, I'm strong. I'm not gonna be cowering. But if you look at his body language and his even his speech, it's apparent that he can tell that something is going on here. So I'll continue this and play for you.
Getting vaccines out, and there's incredible people. They're not actually worms that work there. So hopefully we'll get some of that work back in shape. In fact, if we don't, you could have literally millions of deaths. So, with aid, people think, wow, how much do we give?
So that's also an interesting statement that if we don't get this money back from USAID, we could potentially have millions of deaths. I mean, sounds like a foreboding threat. May make your own opinion. Or maybe he's just so convinced that his work with vaccine developments are saving that many people that he's just so convinced that they're going to lose some of these good souls, which I don't really buy that. But again, I'll play a clip again for you just so you can see again. Look at his body language, look at how he's speaking, and look what he's really telling us here.
A lot of private sector people, when they get into government, they don't take the time necessarily to see what the good work is or why it's structured the way it is. So I'm a little worried, particularly with this USAID stuff. My foundation partners with USAID on nutrition and getting vaccines out. And, there's incredible people. They're not actually worms that work there. So,
It's also interesting how he says that my agency, we partner. The first thing he says is nutrition, right? We know that through Gavi and all the different organizations, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, that vaccines have been a massive part of what they're doing. But maybe he can sense that the public sentiment has drastically changed, and they don't trust him as this the guy who's the master of solving viruses for computers, and therefore should be able to in the health. Just also interesting, just looking at the body language.
hopefully we'll get some of that work back in shape. In fact, if we don't, you could have literally millions of deaths. So, with aid, people think, wow, how much do we give to these countries? As you said, it's less than 1%. People think it's 5% and it should be 2%, but it's actually under 1%.
Yeah. Wow. And still saving lives. Well,
oh, thank goodness, still saving lives, as one of the View hosts very, very, kind of nobly put towards in there. Hey, we're still saving lives, right? And that's the thing, right? The road to hell is paved in good intentions. And that's what I'm seeing, is that the road to hell is paved in good intentions. Like, we're going to go bring democracy to third world countries. We're going to save lives with new medications. We're going to do all these things, but it doesn't seem to play out that way now, does it? Now, continuing, this is going to be something that I have a short video for you. So there's a billionaire named Dan Pena. Now, this is a post on Twitter from Wall Street Apes. His big things happen today. Rand Paul said to abolish USAID and end all foreign aid. Donald Trump ended the USAID website and X account. Elon Musk confirmed that less than 10% of foreign aid actually goes to people in need. Billionaire Dan Pena says the number is closer to 0%. So Dan reveals that all the money pledged to the impoverished countries gets stolen. He says the wealthiest countries get together every year. They pledge between 100 and 500 million. How much of that has been given to those in need? Zero. So I'll go and just play the video for you. So here, this is, it's only a 1-minute video, but this guy's a billionaire, and he's basically walking you through and exposing exactly what happens with this corruption. When you see these things such as, oh, wow, the USAID or this other big NGO has given $200 million to Haiti, which I know the Clintons were heavily involved in Haiti, and a lot of the elites have been involved with Haiti, and I think it relates to the proximity to some of the islands in that region, and maybe Jeffrey Epstein was also involved. But it's very common that you see, $200 million given to this area after a hurricane, and they've built 6 small buildings, or they built a few houses. That's it. So where's the other money going to? Well, this billionaire has an idea about that. Listen to him, a minute and 3 seconds.
We could solve poverty in the entire world with a stroke of a pen. And you know why they don't do that in Africa, Ethiopia, wherever? Because of corruption. None of the money's going, almost none of the money's going to get down to where it belongs. They have a deal called the CAP 28's coming up, where the wealthy countries get together and say how they're going to spend money for the poor countries. This is CAP 28. Every year they pledge between 100 and 500 million. You know how much money's been given? Zero. And it's because of the C word, corruption. But nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. Everybody knows it, but nobody talks about it. And we've been in Haiti, we've been all kinds of places. At the end of the day, it all comes down to the money getting stolen. How much money can you get to the actual needed recipient? And in most cases, it's almost nothing. It's almost nothing.
So there you go. Most cases, almost nothing. And look, I wish we were helping out more people around the world. I really do. But when I see an opportunity, I'm in a grocery store where they say, hey, do you want to donate to this cause? I never do. Doesn't matter whether it's a cancer fund or some sort of wildlife fund. As much as idealistically, I believe in the idea of it, right? I mean, we should be preserving our earth better. We should be getting rid of pollutants and everything. But I've known for quite some time that money's not going to what you think it is, right? So if anything, maybe I'll donate to a local charity that's doing something that I care about in my community. Those are the kind of places I try to direct that money, not to some big, NGO that is probably using it for, only God knows what, right? So continuing though, I want to get into, some of the bigger picture of this, because if you look at the money that the Doge has been uncovering, right? It's $1 billion here, it's $500,000 there, $500 million there. It's a lot of money moving around. But I put a post out on Twitter the other day, and this is what I had to say. I said the USAID is being cracked open and torn apart is so beautiful I get a tear in my eye just thinking about it. But what about the trillions of dollars that have magically disappeared into the military industrial complex? It makes saving $1 billion here or $1 billion there look like finding some dimes under the couch while you've got a pallet of Benjamins in the tarp under a tarp in the garage. So, and this is the big thing though, is that right here, look at this post. This is from Ron Rule over on X. USAID is only 0.7% of the federal budget. If they've found this much fraud and waste in only one tiny piece already, imagine how bad the rest of it is. And this is the question that I have too, because all this money, it's great. I see these reports. Okay, hey, we found an extra, 30 million here, 50 million there. That's great. However, the elephant in the room is the trillions and trillions of dollars that have been lost and siphoned into the military industrial complex. And that leads me to this next post here. So I'm not sure if you are familiar with Catherine Austin Fitts. I've actually been trying to get her on my show for 2 years now, and she's just difficult to get a hold of. She's a busy woman. Anyway, this is an article back from 2017. So I'm going to read just a few small parts of this, because to me, this is what we should be focusing on. As much as I'm happy that we're saving a few billion here and there, I'm looking at the T. I'm looking at the trillions. So here's the article, 2017. MSU scholars find $21 trillion in unauthorized government spending. Defense Department to conduct first ever audit, which I'm sure never happened. So it says, earlier this year, a Michigan State University economist working with graduate students and I'll zoom in a little bit for you, and a former government official found $21 trillion in unauthorized spending in the Departments of Defense and the Housing and Urban Development from the years 1998 to 2015. The work of Mark Skidmore and his team, which included digging into government websites and repeated queries to U.S. agencies that went unanswered, coincided with the Office of Inspector General at one point disabling the links to all key documents showing the unsupported spending. Luckily, the researchers downloaded and stored the documents. Now, the DoD has announced it will conduct its first department-wide independent financial audit in its history. which I didn't see what the announcement or the kind of end result of that was. Nothing has changed, I can tell you that. The Defense Department did not say specifically what led to the audit, but the announcement came 4 days after Skidmore discussed his team's findings on USA Watchdog, a news outlet run by Greg Hunter, also great Rumble YouTube, Rumble Cheese probably not on YouTube anymore. So continuing this, so Skidmore got involved last spring when he heard Catherine Austin Fitts, former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, refer to a report which indicated the Army had $6.5 trillion in unsupported adjustments or spending in fiscal 2015. So that's crazy right there, right? That the Army had $6.5 trillion in unsupported adjustments or spending in the fiscal year of 2015. Given the Army's $122 billion budget, that meant that unsupported adjustments were 54 times the spending authorized by Congress. That's pretty crazy. So he says Skidmore thought Fitts had made a mistake. Maybe she meant 6.5 billion and not 6.5 trillion, he said. So I found the report myself, and sure enough, it was for 6.5 trillion. So it says, continues, Skidmore and Fitts agreed to work together to investigate the issue further. Over the summer, 2 MSU graduate students searched government websites, especially the website of the Office of the Inspector General, looking for similar documents dating to 1998. They found documents indicating a total of $21 trillion in undocumented adjustments over the period of 98 to 2015. So that's $21 trillion. Now, and this is just what they found, and this is only up until 2015. So if you look at the amount of money that's been printed since 2015, even in the last couple of years, I mean, we could be talking here about 50, maybe even $100 trillion. If I'm extrapolating from this, right? Potentially 50 to $100 trillion of government spending that's unaccounted for. This is absolutely insane. And someone, I mean, maybe this video that I'm making right now will go viral and Elon will see it. Maybe he knows about it and he's ignoring this. I don't know. He does have a lot of contracts with the Department of Defense through SpaceX and a lot of the companies that he has. However, imagine this. Imagine if through the Doge or through some other means, they discovered that literally, say, 30, 50, $100 trillion has gone missing over the past few decades. This is absolutely mind-boggling because when you look at the state of our country, like, I've been to Asia, I've been to China, I've been to Taiwan, to Hong Kong. They've got high-speed rail. They've got, they're big, massive cities. The subways in Hong Kong are beautiful subways. They're clean, they're organized, they're always on time. I lived in New York City for a little over a decade, and I can tell you that the subways there suck. Like, they're dangerous. There's subway fires all the time. There's people get hurt. They get stuck. They're delayed. So the fact that potentially $100 trillion has been just kind of lost. Well, we're not really sure where that money went. Well, actually, they probably do know that it went into all kinds of illicit activities. I mean, we know the CIA is one of the largest fundings, ways the CIA is funded is through drug trafficking, right? So I interviewed a CIA whistleblower recently who talked about that, and how that the CIA really got its start and they financed the CIA through illicit drug trafficking, which then makes sense because if you connect the dots and realize that the CIA is central to the economic hitman model as John Perkins laid out, but then you also come to understand that the CIA is heavily involved with USAID and that a lot of the money is going to activities they're funding the CIA operations. And then you look at the fact that the CIA controls the drug trade, and there's that one company I pulled up. What was it here? Let me pull up the this one. So, Chemnonics International, right, which I dug into them. They're heavily involved in Afghanistan, which just so happens to be where they grow poppy for the heroin trade. To me, the picture that's emerging here is that the USAID is just the tip of the iceberg, and that our own government, our own agencies have been running multinational crime syndicates where they are growing and protecting, using our military to protect the poppy fields over in Afghanistan. And this has been now out in the open now. You can, there's all kinds of information about this. I'm not just, kind of pulling conspiracies out of the air, but that the deep state is using taxpayer money to funnel off in these military black budget operations, running drug trades around the world, controlling the poppy flow, controlling the heroin trade, bringing these drugs back into our country. So if you look into, there's a movie that with Tom Cruise, I think it was called The American, I think. I forget the exact name of it. Basically, it was a true story about how Tom Cruise, who played the character, this guy was basically running a CIA drug operation, bringing cocaine into America. So like the corruption is unfathomable. Now, I'm lucky. I'm still thankful that I live in America. Like, I love America. We have the Constitution, and I can still talk about these things, right? If this was communist China, I would have been disappeared a long time ago for this stuff. Trust me. So I'm still grateful. I'm thankful that I live on American soil and I love my country dearly. But I'm not going to overlook these massive crimes that the country has committed. And it's really what it is this deep state apparatus. It's these career criminals, these massive global criminal syndicates that are part of the corporatocracy and part of the banking. And it's a very messy situation. However, our government and our agencies and our military have been used to create this global deep state apparatus. And this is, I think, not, look, I'm not going to be so idealistic to think that, wow, Trump is dismantling all of this and it's all going to be gone and he's getting rid of everything. I mean, look, he just announced that the United States is going to take control and take ownership of the Gaza Strip, which is kind of like, where'd that come from? So again, we're still meddling in foreign affairs, and that's a whole different topic. However, bringing this information to light is so very important. So as we continue, one thing that I just want to point out here that was interesting. So when I put that post up on Twitter about that, and I think the fourth comment stood out to me, or third comment says, yeah, last time there was a threat to audit the military-industrial complex, they blew up the building where the documents were stored. Building 7, as I recall. Get ready for false flag incoming. This is also, there was a video of, I think it was of Rumsfeld on September 10th coming out and saying, well, actually, it seems like we've got about $2.3 trillion we're having a hard time tracking down. And a lot of those documents were in the Pentagon. And then there was the the plane, right? The plane that hit the Pentagon, and it kind of was a bunker buster plane, or was it a missile? You draw your own conclusions. But basically, a lot of the documents were destroyed. So they were never able to actually finish that audit to figure out where that $2.3 trillion went to. So that person, though, I'll bring it up again, Casey makes a good point in saying that, yeah, last time there was an audit to military-industrial complex, they blew up the building where the documents were stored, Building 7. If you're not familiar with Building 7, you should be. It was the other tower that just happened to fall on 9/11 because it had a fire. Well, last I knew, fires don't cause buildings to collapse, especially skyscrapers that are built to withstand those things. But again, save it for a different show. Continuing, though, I want to jump into just the bigger picture of what all this means. So, here's a post that I unrolled the thread so we could read through this, because like what I believe here is that a lot of what we're seeing happening is a major shift, that we're shifting from a unipolar world, right, where the U.S. really was the dominant kind of global empire, which was not just, let's say it was U.S. control. I think the U.S. has been controlled by a lot of the bankers in Europe, and that gets in a whole different discussion. However, that we're shifting into a multipolar world. And so what I think is happening is that as we're emerging, as BRICS and China are emerging as a greater threat to the dollar and to the United States, so I think what Trump is doing is he's pulling back and he's focusing on just strengthening the United States and no longer kind of having the goal of, hey, let's have the U.S. dominate the whole entire world through this economic hitman model and through all the other things that they've been doing, but actually to really focus our resources on the United States so we can compete in a multipolar world. So I'm going to read through this, though, because this is a really, really helpful thread. And I've got another post I'll read through as well that I think is really important for understanding the bigger picture of what's going on here. So the author here, Jack Mallard, says, we are witnessing the unwind of the World War II economic order. What's happening now is much bigger than tariffs. For nearly 80 years, the U.S. exported dollars while importing goods and debt. That system is failing. What's next? A move back to a neutral reserve currency. Now he's saying got Bitcoin. I don't think it'll be Bitcoin personally. Like I would love to see us go back to more of a gold-based currency, but different topic. After World War II, the world was decimated. The U.S. was the only industrial power left standing. Europe and Japan were in ruins. The world needed to rebuild, and the U.S. took the lead. How? The U.S. funded global reconstruction efforts like the Marshall Plan and Bretton Woods. So this is really important because to understand where the United States is now, we have to understand what happened during World War II and post-World War II, and how the new order for the world was established after World War II. And this post does a great job of describing that. It says the idea was simple. The U.S. would buy foreign goods, run trade deficits, send dollars abroad, and let other countries produce stuff. In return, other countries would use the dollar as the global reserve currency, accumulating U.S. debt as their savings. In essence, the world gets dollars, the U.S. gets goods. Now, here's a graph showing the dominance of manufacturers' goods in the U.S. trade deficit, right? So, whereas before, in the, say, 1990, we were producing a lot more stuff and sending it out, but actually there's become a massive trade deficit where the U.S. is exporting dollars and importing products from other countries. So it does give us that dollar dominance. However, it does it through gutting our own manufacturing. So it says the system did what it was supposed to and fueled decades of global growth. Japan, Germany, South Korea, and eventually China all industrialized by producing goods for Americans. The U.S. kept printing dollars and the world kept accepting them, because they sort of had no other choice. Now he's got two maps there. One, it's showing South Korea's GDP per capita versus the rest of the world, and you can see that there's a significant shift there. That so you can see there's from 1970 to 2016. Okay, it's just showing that basically that things are kind of leveling out. Sorry, it's too much to zoom in on that. But continuing though, looking at, you can see the transformation of the Korean economy from 45 to 2003, a huge shift. Same thing with Japan's economic growth, right? So it says the issue was this wasn't sustainable. Printing pieces of paper and not doing any real work couldn't last forever. No way, who would have thought? The U.S. was sending dollars out while manufacturing left the country. Over time, the U.S. became a consumer and not a producer. And this is, if you look at a lot of what Trump is doing right now, he's turning America back into a producer. Because when we're a consumer, we're relying on all these other countries to send us their goods, and we're exporting our dollar. What happens, though, if our dollar no longer counts to them because of the de-dollarization campaign by the BRICS nations, then we're kind of screwed because no one wants our dollars, yet we're dependent on importing all of our goods from other countries. So looking at this, China's rise to manufacturing dominance, you can see that back in 2004, this is the Chinese and U.S. share of global manufacturing. So in 2004, just 2 decades ago, we were manufacturing 22% of the global manufacturing output. China was at 8.7%. Fast forward to 2018, China's at 28% and US is down to 16%. That's a huge shift, right? Because this is power and there's a huge shift. So it says in summary, the problem is the US can't run permanent trade deficits forever. The US deindustrialized itself. Manufacturing jobs gone, middle class crushed. Meanwhile, China rose by taking over global production. All the while, the U.S. racked up $35 trillion in debt and other nations began to question the system. Why hold U.S. debt as a reserve while the USD loses value? So here, this is a projection of the U.S. debt. Looking at right now, 2020, this is showing 2023, it was at approaching 35 trillion. The projection here is that by 2033, it looks like it's exceeding 50 trillion. Okay, so This is where the Triffin dilemma comes in. If the US dollar is the global reserve, the US must run deficits to supply the world with dollars. But doing this hollows out the domestic economy, forcing the US to import more than it exports. The global demand for dollars keeps the dollar artificially strong, making US goods less competitive and pushing manufacturing overseas. It's a trap, and finally, it's failing. So, this is why the US needs to reshore production and weaken the dollar. If the US wants to bring back manufacturing, it needs to make American production competitive again. This means two things: tariffs, force companies to stop offshoring production, and two, a weaker dollar, make US exports cheaper and more attractive. This is exactly what Trump and the new administration is pushing for. You see, tariffs are not just about trade, they're part of a larger strategy to shift the US economic model. A weaker dollar makes US exports more competitive and also helps inflate away its debt. However, one problem Trump has run into is Jerome Powell. The US government doesn't control the US dollar, a private bank does. The Fed isn't cutting rates fast enough for Trump to keep his campaign promises and execute his plan. This is where Trump's battle with the Fed begins. Trump needs to lower rates because it benefits real estate, debtors, and economic growth. But Powell has been keeping rates higher for longer, slowing the economy and fighting inflation. Trump can't get his weaker dollar until Powell cuts rates aggressively. So, how does Trump force Powell's hand? Now, if you're familiar with, I did an interview with Tom Luongo, and he has a very interesting perspective here in saying that Powell is actually working to collapse the Bank of England, which is it kind of throws a wrench in this idea, but he adds a very different perspective to that. But that's a whole different story. And actually, if you want to watch that video, I'll put it in the description because it's a fascinating breakdown of why Tom Luongo thinks that Powell is actually working to dismantle the global banking system that's been ruling America. Interesting. So, okay, back to the article though. How does Trump force Powell's hand? It says if the Fed won't cut voluntarily, Trump will create conditions where they don't have a choice. By pushing tariffs and other economic pressure, Trump can manufacture a mini financial crisis if Powell doesn't play along. He'll have to act. All of this came right after Powell spoke on Wednesday, by the way. Coincidence? I think not. The Fed doesn't want the death of the Pax Americana, so eventually they'll have to cave and cut rates. That's when the dollar weakens and the real devaluation begins. Trump knows this is the way. He mentioned the short-term pain being worth it last night. This is what we were living through as I'm typing out this tweet storm. At the same time, it's no secret the rest of the world is moving away from the dollar. China, Russia, and even Saudi Arabia no longer want to rely on USD for trade. The BRICS nations are exploring alternatives. Countries are selling US treasuries and reducing their dollar reserves. This means we're headed back to a neutral reserve currency system one way or another. Now, he happens to think it's Bitcoin. I personally think that I'd hope we go to something more gold-backed. Whether it's get Bitcoin or gold, though, that's why either way, like for me, gold and precious metals are so key because, what we're seeing here is we're going to see a weakening of the dollar, right? Which is not a good thing for those of us that are holding the dollar because our dollar is going to be losing its strength. But from a global perspective, it's going to help bring manufacturing back to America. And it's going to help us really kind of return back to where I think this nation needs to be. But if I, me personally, I'm not sitting with all my money sitting in dollars. Any extra money I have, I'm trying to put into things like food, brass, but also precious metals. That's my own thing. Okay. Now, it says historically, global reserve currencies were neutral assets like gold under Bretton Woods systems. Now he's getting into a few other things here, but so zooming out, we're watching the global monetary order reset in real time. The World War II economic model is breaking down. The U.S. is reshoring and weakening the dollar. The world is de-dollarizing. The Fed will be forced to cut rates. The U.S. will inflate away its debt. Okay, so here's a timeline of dollar dominance. So it says people think tariffs are just about trade or the Fed will hold rates forever to fight inflation. They don't understand how deep this shift really is. The post-World War II economic system is dead. The U.S. is reindustrializing. The dollar is going lower. For the first time in human history, now he's getting into Bitcoin. But again, I'm not really a big Bitcoin guy. But he makes a very good point, though, in explaining how this system has worked, how it's played out. I want to now conclude the show with one more tweet I want to read through because this, to me, this particular tweet does such a good job of really encapsulating the big picture of what we're seeing happening here. Right? This guy Arnaud Bertrand, who says it's becoming clearer and clearer that we're looking at a seismic shift in the U.S.'s relationship with the world between one, the U.S. dismantling its foreign interference apparatuses like USAID. Two, Marco Rubio stating that we're now in a multipolar world with multi great powers in different parts of the planet, and that the post war global order is not just obsolete, it is now a weapon being used against us. This all makes complete sense now, given the information that we've just reviewed together. And three, the tariffs on supposed allies like Mexico and Canada or the EU. This is the US effectively saying our attempt at running the world is over. To each his own. We're now just another great power, not the indispensable nation. It looks dumb, as the Wall Street Journal just wrote, if you're still mentally in the old paradigm. But it's always a mistake to think that what the US or any country does is dumb. Hegemony was going to end sooner or later. And now the US is basically choosing to end it on its own terms. It is the post American world order brought to you by America itself. Even the tariffs on allies viewed under this angle makes sense, as it redefines the concept of allies they don't want, or maybe rather can't afford vassals anymore, but rather relationships that evolve based on current interests. You can either view it as decline, because it does unquestionably look like the end of the American empire, or as avoiding further decline, controlled withdrawal from the imperial commitments in order to focus on resources on core national interests rather than being forced into an even messier retreat at the later stage. In any case, it is the end of an era. And while the Trump administration looks like chaos to many observers, they're probably much more attuned to the changing realities of the world and their own country's predicament than the predecessors. Acknowledging the existence of a multipolar world and choosing to operate it within it, rather than trying to maintain an increasingly costly global hegemony, couldn't be delayed much further. It looks messy, but it's probably better than maintaining the fiction of American primacy until it eventually collapses under its own weight. This is not to say the U.S. won't continue to wreak havoc on the world, and in fact, we might be seeing it become even more aggressive than before, because when it previously was, badly and very hypocritically, trying to maintain some semblance of self-proclaimed rules-based order, it now doesn't even have to pretend, and it's under any constraint, not even the constraint of playing nice with allies. It's the end of the U.S. empire, but definitely not the end of the U.S. as a major disruptive force in world affairs. Pardon me for that one. All in all, this transformation may mark one of the most significant shifts in international relations since the fall of the Soviet Union. And those most unprepared for it, as is already painfully obvious, are America's vassals caught completely flat-footed by the realization that the patron they've relied on for decades is now treating them with just another set of countries to negotiate with. So I think this is such a good summary, and this is exactly what I see happening, is that we're shifting. So the de-dollarization campaign, the rise of the BRICS nations, it's not something the U.S. can compete with anymore. The power, the global power that the U.S. had is retracting now. This is the ebb and flow of society. I mean, Rome wasn't Rome forever, right? They didn't maintain the empire. No empire lasts forever. And I believe that what we're witnessing is the fall of the global American empire. But as that author in that tweet puts out, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because I mean, personally, I would much rather see our money and actually not our tax dollars. I don't want tax dollars, right? But I want to see our money and the tariffs that our government is earning. I want to see that focusing on America first. And ultimately, that's where I land, is that I truly am America first. And I think that we have to take care of our own selves, take care of our own nation. And that is the future that I'm hoping for. So We covered a lot of information in that show. I'd love to hear in the comments what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? There's so much more I wish I could be going over, but it turned into a 10-hour show. So I tried to keep it concise and follow a particular narrative. If this is your first time watching Man in America, welcome. I think this show gives you a good idea of what I cover here. It's, I like touching on the bigger picture, the geopolitics and everything, but also the corruption, the acknowledgement of the deep state, the warring powers, the cabal, and everything that's happening in this world, but also looking at what it means for me as just a guy living in America. I've got, a little 4-year-old girl and a 1-year-old girl and a family, and I'm looking to the future thinking, like, what is there for us? And I don't want to be a country that becomes subservient to China in 5 or 10 years and we're, speaking Chinese. I want to maintain the strength of America, but I want to bring it back to us and bring God back into the country and do all these amazing things. So thank you again for joining us. One thing as we are concluding, I did mention before, Noble Gold. Look, if you have been on the fence about gold and silver, honestly, give them a call. Give them a call, walk through things, because what I'm seeing here is that, and I really, this isn't a sales pitch, trust me. It's like, do what you want to do, but I care about you. If you're watching this show, you're my family. I care about you. Like I had these same phone calls with my mom, like, 2 days ago. Mom, you got to put some more money into silver because the dollar is going to be weakening for these exact same reasons. I think that we're living in an area where we will see a massive decline of the dollar, and a lot of it caused by the de-dollarization campaign, but also just caused by the life cycle of a fiat currency. And so for me, precious metals are a safe haven. They've lasted thousands and thousands of years, the rise and fall of civilizations. So for me, that's what gold and silver represent. It's a safe haven. It's what, I wouldn't say put everything you have into precious metals, but if you want to take a chunk of that and you want to feel safe about it and put that chunk into precious metals, then that is absolutely what I would recommend. Also, one other thing is Balance of Nature, one of our other great, great sponsors of the show. And folks, numbers don't lie. The impact that Balance of Nature makes every single day is astounding. So you can see the numbers for yourself on their website at balanceofnature.com. Listen to these stats concerning Balance of Nature worldwide success. So more than 1,000 success stories reported each month. Hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide, millions of orders delivered each year, and billions, yes, billions of fruits and veggies, supplements consumed by people who've decided to start living better. There's only one number that's missing. That's you. So do what I did and add yourself to these numbers. Start taking Balance of Nature's whole food supplements like so many others did around the world. Here's another number that should get your attention, 35%. So use my discount code Seth to get 35% off plus free shipping and their money back guarantee. So you must use my discount code Seth. So call them at 800-246-8751 and use discount code Seth, or order online at balanceofnature.com. Use discount code Seth to get 35% off plus free shipping. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure speaking with you. And I appreciate these opportunities. And if this was helpful for you, again, let me know in the comments. And if you really loved it, do me a favor and